Well, our final voice in today's programme is Dr. Stefanie Babst, former Deputy Assistant Secretary-General of NATO, who joins us from Germany. Dr. Babst, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. Always a pleasure talking to you. I'd like to ask you what I asked our guest just a moment ago, Ambassador Carla Sands of the United States. Are we closer now to a state of peace between Russia and Ukraine than we were, say, a week ago?
Well, for sure, there is a lot of strategic messaging ongoing, a lot of posturing, a lot of talk about the likelihood that we enter a phase towards peace. But if I look at the grand picture, the bigger picture, I am not really convinced that we have made very decisive steps. President Putin is still on the warpath. He still believes in victory. He continues to send missiles and drones to Ukraine. He continues to send his own soldiers into the trenches. And there are absolutely no indications that he is going to reconsider his course of action. And then there is President Trump, who is still very eager to initiate a broader reset with Moscow. That is still his strategic objective, I think, especially to look for economic cooperation, strategic assets, resources in Ukraine. So, yeah, I mean, despite all his waffling about peace, I can't really see that he is prepared to really confront Russia. By contrast, I mean, we've seen last week that he actually has instilled sides with President Putin on a number of issues. And the Europeans, on their part, well, I mean, they are where they have been some 3.5 years ago. They can't possibly think of doing one thing without President Trump, without the United States. They're still not prepared to really go on their own. And we've seen the lineup of European leaders in the headmaster's office yesterday. So I must admit, no, I'm not really convinced that we are really an inch closer to peace.
OK, you've made a lot of important points there, Dr. Babst. I mean, but let me just challenge you on the notion that isn't it better that President Trump and President Putin have some sort of dialogue, that they are meeting, that some misunderstandings can be discussed or averted? And just to pick up on Ambassador Sands a minute ago, I mean, she talked about very strong diplomacy by Donald Trump, peace through strength, and preventing World War III from breaking out. Isn't there some merit to the dialogue argument as opposed to the no contact argument that perhaps other people would think would be a better course of action?
I think the key strategic issue that we all struggle with, including President Trump, including our European leaders, is how do you go about a ruthless aggressor, somebody who blackmails you with nuclear weapons, somebody who is really adamant to terrorize people in another country, somebody who is really adamant to change the security balance of power. How do you go about him? And I must admit, I have lost any hope. I mean, that both on the United States side nor on the European side, there is any resolve, any stamina to really push back, I mean, to contain, to hold President Putin accountable, to help Ukraine win against the Russian troops. So we have left, unfortunately, this behind because there is, as I said, there is no political will. So now there is talk about, how can we accommodate President Putin? How can we, facilitate dialogue? Of course, it's important that Ukrainians talk to their Russian counterparts when it comes to exchanging prisoners as such. But the broader strategic issue, which is still unanswered and unresolved, in my humble view, can only be answered by pushing Russia back. But again, there is no political will for that.
I mean, you were making a point in your first answer about the Europeans who show up in the headmaster's office and falling into line and flattering the president and everything else. I mean, you also said something along the lines of them not going it alone. What what did you mean by that? Do you think perhaps the United States should be, left out of this, and the Europeans and the Ukrainians should get together and say, right, this is our problem, we're going to tackle it together? Because, frankly, the Americans might welcome that kind of an outcome.
Well, at the end of the day, it's our problem. It's a European issue. It is President Putin waging war, hybrid war, against us, against my country, against other European countries. It's primarily our problem. And that's why I think we've had, in the past 3.5 years, ample time to really help Ukraine win and push back. We didn't do so. We were too cautious and too cowardish, and there was not really a sense of that you can actually confront Russia robustly. So I have been arguing, and I continue doing so, that we Europeans, including obviously some other like-minded democracies, we are not completely powerless. We are the largest, or the third largest economic bloc. We have 450 million people. We have 2 nuclear powers amongst our ranks. We have 1.9 million soldiers. Why do we make ourselves so small? We keep on, talking about resuming more responsibility for our own defense. But when it comes to the crux, when it comes really to making decisive moves, we all hide. Our leaders, not we collectively, but our leaders hide behind the United States. And the classical example of that is, the issue about security guarantees. This is on the table for at least a year. The coalition of the willing members have been discussing that back and forth in endless rounds of negotiations and discussions. So where is the European answer to providing security guarantees? So everyone seems to be yesterday completely relieved when President Trump said, well, you Europeans, you go first, you are on the first line of respondents, and then we'll help you. But he remained completely vague, and now he's saying that there will be absolutely no US boots on the grounds, which is absolutely no surprise, because it was obvious that he won't send them.
Right, but in one sense, you're sounding a bit like President Trump in criticizing the European leaders for being, for lack of a better word, ineffectual when it comes to crafting a solution and finding a way out of this this quagmire. It does sound like you and him would agree on this one.
Well, I don't think there's a lot we've agreed on, but yes, I do agree that Europeans have really failed in the past decades to live up to their promises, to spend more on defense, to become, autonomous, to invest into their own strategic interests and to really pursue them wherever possible. Of course, we could do this jointly with the United States, but we should not make ourselves so reliant, so dependent on them. And simply hope that by buying US weapons and let President Trump then start digging out Ukrainian rare earths and minerals and other valuable strategic resources, and we just provide what? We provide the cover for it? Is this the plan? I'm just putting this a bit provocatively, but I think this is not a strategy. We would need to be clear about what is it that we want to do with Russia. And if the answer is everybody is happy to kind of like coexist with this regime, and everybody is happy to kind of like look for potential future economic opportunities, the first voices of that are already pretty vocal in my country. Then I can only say, okay, then that's your call. But I don't find this in any way convincing.
Okay. Just the presence of those European leaders at the White House yesterday, how valuable was it? And just to defend one of the leaders, your leader, in fact, the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, he did push back a bit on the issue of the ceasefire, because he seemed to remind President Trump that this is an important step towards peace and not to overlook it. So there was a bit of pushback from him, but overall, how valuable was it that they all showed up to keep President Zelensky company?
From a psychological and again strategic messaging point of view, I thought it was very good that the Europeans accompanied President Zelensky to this meeting, because we all recall how the first meeting evolved, and that wasn't really very nice for President Zelensky and not very helpful. So, yeah, I mean, the orchestration of here we are, a bunch of Europeans lined up in front of President Trump, happy that they were able to make points. By the way, points like the ceasefire, who has been or have been out there on the tables of discussions for months. Okay, yeah, if you think this is a wonderful deliverable, and obviously President Trump seemed to be kind of like open to it, but how reliable is that? How much can we trust that it really sank into him? And how much is it that we can really trust his overall course of action? And I have my strongest doubts, as I've had them ever since he called President Putin in February 16th.
So you think in an ideal world, President Trump wouldn't have picked up the telephone in February. He wouldn't have met President Putin, rather, in Alaska either. You think President Trump is misguided in engaging. Is that roughly what you're saying?
No, I'm saying that he is pursuing a strategic objective, an objective that he has set for himself, that his MAGA acolytes have set for themselves, which is, obviously the policy of Washington, which is to build the broader, space, build the conditions for a reset between the United States and Russia. And the reset is primarily focused on economic collaboration. It's focused on collaboration on tech issues. It's focused on collaboration in the field of energy and other strategic relevant resources and minerals. This is what the two leaders have in mind. And they already scribbled that down on a piece of paper in February, and have been working on that for the past 6 months. So I think that drives President Putin, and not so much his love, as he put it, for people both in Ukraine and in Russia or elsewhere.
I just want to challenge one of the commonly held opinions, which is that President Putin, after Ukraine, if he sees Ukraine wasn't so difficult after all, will then turn his attention to other European countries and think of further territorial expansion. But that argument, which we hear quite a lot, it's quite a simplistic argument, because it's been getting on 3 years that Russia invaded Ukraine, and it hasn't been easy. He's managed in 3 years to occupy, we think, 20% of Ukraine. Hundreds of thousands of lives have been lost on both sides. We don't know the exact number, but it hasn't been that easy. Don't you think an exercise like this, if nothing else, has shown President Putin, don't try this again? What do you make of that?
Well, I've been working on Russia issues for the past 25 years, so I've been following President Putin's course of action quite closely. And I think he is really an opportunist, in the sense that he'll always looks for opportunities, and he looks for opportunities to advance his own strategic goals and objectives. So if he finds the other side being too weak, if he finds holes, if he finds opportunities, he is the first one who tries to take advantage of these weaknesses and vulnerabilities. And that's why he has also been so successful in launching a hybrid war on us. Again, this is nothing, which can't be and should be sidelined, because I think this is really quite big, what he does in terms of influencing elections and disinformation campaigns and big time cyber attacks and jamming and, the shadow fleet and all that. So, of course, he will continue testing us. Whether he will, as you have suggested, go in militarily, conventionally, another big style, I don't think that his calculus is that he must be, because, we have been, in his view, we have not really been a very challenging opponent, because we keep on paddling back and we keep on telling him that we are not prepared to confront him robustly.
Okay, so you think he will continue to seek out opportunities and perhaps to prize open any gaps that he sees. I mean, overall, just to wrap up our conversation, Dr. Babst, I mean, how concerned are you about the overall security of the European continent?
Clearly, my first and foremost focus is Ukraine, because I think the Ukrainians have really suffered unproportionally, big time, and I fear they will continue to suffer quite a bit. But then again, I must admit I'm slightly optimistic if I look at the unprecedented level of their resilience, their courage, their smartness to really, really push back. So I think they will continue doing this regardless of what we decide here. At least part of civil society in Ukraine seems to be prepared to do so. But if I look at my country, if I look at discussions in other countries, I'm quite worried that we completely lack as societies. We lack the type of resilience and the type of resolve and stamina to really acknowledge reality, because I think the broader public opinion is still of the view that peace, whatever this means in Ukraine at some point, it could be and should be achieved, and then we could all go back into the sleep wagon. And I hope this will not be the case, because we really have a deadly serious adversary in front of us. And then I haven't even mentioned another big one, which is China, which perhaps could be the course of another conversation at a different stage.
Absolutely. Well, we look forward to talking to you about China at another stage, as you suggested, and to continuing this conversation. Thank you very much, though, meanwhile. Dr. Stefanie Babst, a real pleasure talking to you.